Imagine it. A child is screaming and throwing a fit. Our first thought is typically bad behavior. Most of the time, that is not the case. Have you ever been informed about emotional behavioral disorders? Well, with or without good parenting skills, a child could suffer with emotional behavioral disorders. Teachers are probably the largest group of people who should be thoroughly educated on this subject. They will without a doubt have at least one child or multiple at one point or another in their classroom. Many people will encounter situations involving these children or may even become a parent or have a child with emotional behavioral disorders. The term is difficult to define, but the main words in every definition are inability, mood change, and fear. If you're in a classroom and a child does not get their way and becomes mad, there can be screams or sometimes their hands can go flying. And we all know that child who didn't get what they wanted at the toy or the candy at the grocery store. Sometimes these children are facing more than just throwing a fit. Sometimes these kids may be facing some sort of anxiety, which in general is a recurring fear of situations. This can cause a child to react when there's really not anything to react to. Anxiety is one of the largest categories under the term emotional behavioral disorders. Generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, which we usually know as OCD, panic disorders, post-traumatic stress syndrome or PTSD, and social phobia are all different types of anxiety that fall into the category. In my PowerPoint, I go more into detail about each type of anxiety. Anxiety is not the only thing that falls under the term emotional behavioral disorders. It can also include socialized aggression and schizophrenia. What do these kids face that make it hard for them to live an everyday life? These children struggle with learning or becoming what we consider socially awkward. We are quick to judge them by calling them weird or lazy. We want them to be able to learn or communicate with everyone in their path, but who really stops to help them overcome their fears? I personally understand how one struggling with emotional behavioral disorders can end up feeling helpless and alone, even though it is generally their own fault and their own actions that put them in these situations. My cousin has been diagnosed with emotional behavioral disorders, and most of his life has been battle after battle with family, friends, and authority figures. He physically beat his brother and sister over the course of their childhood, and like a tornado, broke his peers' things and even his families. His mother counseled, disciplined, and punished him, but to no avail. He is currently serving a 10-year sentence for arson and has a lengthy rap sheet. My cousin lacks remorse, and because of this, he will probably never change his ways. His actions are simply carried out with no thought or regard to other individuals. Shame and guilt are not characteristics he possesses, and he only cares about others when it benefits him. I completely understand the need to shut this type of person out, like most of my family has. But we must all see this as a disease and a sick person who needs guidance and support. Many teachers have begun using a tool called Social Emotional Learning Foundations, or SELF, to extend language and promote emotional and behavioral self-regulation. While teaching early literacy skills that include vocabulary development and comprehension, it is aimed at a small group instruction and intensifies in levels as needed. It has also been found that children who deal with emotional behavioral disorders tend to have a lower language level. This makes it somewhat easier to identify these children earlier and help them get help. I read an article that interviewed many leaders in the profession of teaching who have dealt with and helped children with emotional behavioral disorders to the best of their ability. Their advice, although it is intended for teachers, could help any of us become better support for these children. They taught us to be passionate, willing to be a lifelong learner, find or be a support system, and to stay humble and compassionate to these children. In conclusion, we should slow down and take into consideration what could be going on in a young child's life. For future teachers like me, get the best training foundation possible, be passionate and willing to learn, and adapt to new situations and problems. Be willing to find new ways to handle reoccurring situations that are not having the best outcome. Always stay compassionate to them, because although the kid may be annoying to you, you may be all they have to look up to. So before you think a child just doesn't want to listen, it is important to not just write it off as bad behavior. Investigate and help. Children with emotional behavioral disorders need our support to succeed.